Good afternoon. I want to welcome you all to the administrator training session. We're glad you all could make it in. For those of you who don't know me, I'm Rebecca Schultz, the Director of Assessment Services, previously the Industrial Unit Manager, so I'm sure I've spoken to a lot of you at some point in time. Just a couple of housekeeping things quickly. There is a Wi-Fi password on the agenda on your tables. If you would like to log in, it's there for you. Case of emergency, just up these few stairs and through the black curtain. You can still use that door as an emergency exit if you need. The focus of this afternoon's session will be filled with great information on how appeal process works. We'll hear from Government Relations, the Saskatchewan Municipal Board, SAMA, and have some time for questions towards the end if you have any. So with that, we're going to jump right in. We got a lot of stuff to cover, and I'd like to call up Yuan Jung from Government Relations to start us off.
Thank you, everyone, and thank you, Rebecca, for the introduction. I really appreciated this opportunity to be able to present for this topic, and I always appreciate any kind of opportunities for communication. And I also have some items that I would like to update you on this project. As you may be aware, or you may be a part of the consultation, be a part of the the group, like for the consultation when this project photo revision renewal initiative was planned or was implemented. So then I can I'll start here. If you have any questions, you can ask at any time. Just raise your hand, or you can ask at the end of the presentation. So a quick review of the kind of a project. So when this project was, I think there was a consultation in 2019, before my time with the government relations. Stakeholders identified 4 areas for improvement for the first level appeal process, which it was decided that these 4 changes need to be made. So first is the creation of the Office of Registrar, which is kind of a creative of my position. This one was implemented in the fall of 2021. And next item is there needs to be a mandatory training and a certification process for all boards of revision, which starting January 1st, 2023, this was implemented. So the training was delivered through the Zhangsheng Shoyama Graduate School of Public Policy at the University of Regina. And the third item was the creation of a centralized board of revision. This one was implemented at the same time, January 1st, 2023. I will get to this in more details, at the later slides. So the last one was the establishment of advisory committee, Assessment Appeals System Advisory Committee. This one was approved, and the members were appointed in April 2024. So I do have a list of members to this committee in the following slides. So the first item I would like to talk about is the board of revision appointments, which this is the time of year that many municipalities start to open their assessment role, which you have the options of appointing your, you can find a couple members to form a board that for your municipality, or you can join a district board. You can, find a private board, or you can use the centralized board. I understand like here, you know, I know a number of municipalities, you do have your own board, or you are a part of a district board, or a number of you may, use a private board, which you probably don't access this information, frequently, but just kind of just to provide some information to you. So before you open your assessment role, or before you kind of publish a notice in the Gazette, make sure you have a certified board of revision appointed, which basically it provides taxpayers a place to file their appeal, because you have to have that information available when you open the assessment role. If you do not have, then you may receive an email from me that kind of verify this information with you, say if you do have a board appointed, and if you do not, then I have to assign the centralized board of revision to you. So make sure you have this board of revision before opening assessment role. And the second item is to notify me, like your board of revision appointment. So, because I need to have that information available, because when SAMA does share the assessment role, open and close that dates with me on a weekly basis. So when I noticed you open the assessment role, but I don't have the information that whether you have a board of revision available or not, then that's the time, I will kind of connect with you and check, do you have this available? So I get this type of information from two places. So I can get a copy of resolution from the municipality directly, or like I reach out to the board of revision and ask them to provide me a list of municipalities that appoint them at the board of revision. So they do, provide this information with me quite frequently. So make sure you either send a copy of your resolution with me or with the board of revision. Because if you provide it to your board of revision, they will share the information with me, which eventually I will get that information. So which the last bullet, it's the one I just discussed, which is the kind of the centralized board of revision. At the time, you open the assessment role, but I don't have the information for which board of revision you appointed, then I will contact you. I'll say, do you have a board of revision appointed? If you do not, I have to assign this centralized board of revision to you. This is in the regulations, and this is law, that if you don't have one, I usually, because this is kind of still the first beginning years that we implemented this change, so I usually will give a couple more days and say if you have other board of revision that you prefer, but if you do not, then I have to assign this centralized board of revision to you. So this is this slide is talk about the board revision certification process update. So if you are not a part of any board revision, you don't have to pay too much attention to this information. But if you do support a board revision, that you may want to check this information. That we are going to update the current board revision certification application form, which is an online form that on government's website. We created another form for the board revision to make updates. So for example, if you are thinking of creating a board revision, a new board next year, then you want to have some members available, get them trained, and then apply for certification. Just be aware that the certification form, the application form, will be updated very soon. It's not yet, but very soon. I'm expecting only a few days. But anyway, it will be through the same place that you fill up the form. It's an online form you are not able to download, so anytime you access that link at the bottom, that you'll find that form, it will be the most recent form. So another form is for the board revision updates. For example, very frequently they will be removing some members, they will be adding new members, then their contact information may change. All those type of updates will be captured like through another online, like a virtual fillable form. So a quick update to this board revision training. As of March 26th this year, there are 351 people registered for the training, and 298 people successfully completed the training. So I have to say, most of the people who completed the training, they either are part of a board revision, or they are administrators who would like to be trained for this, or want to get know this information like through this training. There are also some people from our other groups that are interested in the training and take the training. So as of December 31st, 2024, in whole Saskatchewan, we have 25 certified board revision, covering 99%, over 99% of the municipalities. Sometimes, when I check the Saskatchewan Gazette notice, I do notice people or administrators, when you publish that assessment notice, that they put their own name in the notice, saying that they are the contact for appeals, which this is not recommended. Usually you want to put the secretary of the board revision in that notice, because they are the people to receive appeals. If you do receive appeals, make sure you forward to the board revision secretaries. I will get to that later in other slides. So last bullet is information that I would like you to be aware that if you are, if your municipality is thinking of finding a number of people form a board revision, or if you are part of the district board, that you will have new members or secretaries that they need to register for the training, that we still have over 60 unused spots that can get you registered the training at half price, which currently it only costs $100 per person. So half price will be $50 per person. I do notice that some people, when they register the training, they forgot to apply the code, which you kind of lost that kind of opportunity, which we still have a number of spots available. So make sure you do apply the code when you register for the training. And also those codes, we only want the board revision members or secretaries, when they register, we want them to apply the code. So we do have some public, they called my number and ask if I can use the code and get it half price. I said no. I said this is only reserved for board revision members and secretaries. So we don't want to apply the code for any general public. So here is a quick update for the centralized board revision. As you are aware, we had a contract agreement with a nonprofit organization called ADR, Institute of Saskatchewan. So they act as the centralized board revision for the province. So they are the same as other certified board revision, so which can be used voluntarily or by default. So by default, which I explained, just to kind of reinstate that, when you open the assessment role and without appointing a board of revision, that's the time that I have to assign this centralized board of revision to you. So here is the last items that for this board of revision renewal initiative. So which is the creation of the assessment appeals system advisory committee. So the goal for this committee is to champion changes that have been made to the appeal system and recommend strategies and actions for continuous improvement. So this committee has met twice since created. So once this was in May, on May 30th. The second time was on September 11th. So you can see that I do include a number of names for the representatives that you may be familiar. So the committee currently has 10 members. So each organization nominated one member. Then we do have like a delegate, alternative member. If they would like to nominate, they can have another alternative member. So for SUMA, the representative is Bev Dubé. For SAM, the representative is Bill Huber. And there's WUMAS, it's Rodney Dett, and Doran Scott for RMAA, and Paula Munch for Northern Saskatchewan Association. And Betty, as you all know, represents SAMA on the committee. And we also have a member from Saskatchewan Municipal Board, another member from the Saskatchewan Assessment Appraisers Association, and one member from Canadian Property Tax Association, representing taxpayers. The other is one member from Ministry of Government Relations. So the last part, which I have a number of recent legislative amendments that I would like to introduce, on each item. Just want to make sure. So far, do you have any questions? Seeing none. Okay, there will be. Not sure if you can see it clearly. So before I get into the legislative amendments, I would like to make you aware that we just updated the assessment appeals guide in Saskatchewan for citizens. This is for everybody, for the general public, for municipalities. This is for everybody. So if you have people reach out to you asking information about how they file appeal, you can refer them to this guide. The last one was the 2020 guide. Right now it's the most recent one that just published a couple weeks ago. It's the 2025 Assessment Appeals Guide in Saskatchewan for citizens. Now I can get to the legislative amendments to the Municipal Act. As you are aware, equivalent sections are in the Cities Act and in the Northern Municipalities Act. I'm not sure if we have any members here from the cities or northern municipalities. So the sections that was put here was all for the Municipalities Act. So there are, section number would be different for the Cities Act and the Northern Municipalities Act. So I will introduce these changes one by one. So first, the definition of ordinary mail now includes email. So if you see the act saying, you have to serve this through ordinary mail, now it includes email, as long as an email address was provided. So previously, when you or when appellant, when they file a notice of appeal, I think they may have to serve it in person. Right now, if email address was provided, they can file a notice of appeal through email, which I guess some board of revision kind of already have that in place. The other is establishment of a board of revision, which a number of these are not new. They were implemented, I think, back to 2023, that you may be aware already, that all boards of revision have to be certified. And each board of revision has to have at least one secretary and 3 board members. Yeah, and I talk about, the situation that when a centralized board of revision will be assigned by default. Others like revision are to publish in regulation. I think that requirement I'm not sure. I think like a lot of board revisions haven't started to publish their decisions yet, but I included a section number there that you can check. The next one is the Registrar of Board Revision, which is my role. That was not new. It was implemented in 2023. Oh, sorry. Yeah, thank you. Yes. Okay, yeah, that makes sense. So, yeah, I don't know how I missed. So the next is the District Board of Revision, which a number of you may, it may apply to you. So if you are part of District Board of member, and if you are looking for members to sit on the board, that you may be aware there's a restriction that if the council member, if it's a school board member or municipal employee, they are not eligible to be a part of the board of revision. That is for regular board of revision. But if it is a district board of revision, they can sit on the board, they can be a part, but they cannot hear appeals that regarding a property that is from their municipality. But they can that is not from their municipality. So I do get questions on this very kind of often. That we do have a council member, like he can be a part of this board. Can he hear appeals? He can hear appeals for the property that is not from the municipality that he's coming from. Yeah. Centralized board of revision, I kind of talked about it a number of times, which is the most important thing with the centralized board of revision is, when at the time when you open the assessment role and you don't have a board of revision available, that I have to assign this board of revision to you. Which this is the idea behind this is people need to have a place to file their appeal. So when you open the assessment role, they can come and check whether there's a mistake. If they think there's an error there, and if they don't get it resolved with agreement to adjust or conversation, and they want to file appeal, they need to have a place to file an appeal. The next change is like consolidation of appeals, which the board of revision secretary, they can consolidate appeals if the one PO is filed regarding the same property. So for the same property, it means, for example, if this is a multi-residential or apartment or council, which they kind of same building structure but multiple units. So it could be the same owner or could be tenants. like, renting this, the owner rents those properties out, or it could be the owner who own like a building that has many units. So if they file appeal, those appeals can be consolidated, which there will be one hearing, but the decision will apply to a number of appeals on a number of properties. The next one is filing notice of appeal. I kind of touched this already, that when you publish assessment notice in the Gazette, make sure you put the address or contact information for the secretary of the Board of Revision. And don't put your own, or don't put the administrator's contact there. But if you do, and you did receive appeal, make sure you forward it to the Board of Revision secretary, because they are the ones that will handle appeals. And there's also another requirement in the Act, which kind of, asks all parties, especially the appellants, if they have agents, their agents, and the assessments or assessors or SAMA, they need to make an effort and attempt to enter into agreement before filing a notice of appeal, which we hope, every party takes the benefit of agreement to adjust. If a conversation can resolve the matter, they do not need to file appeal, which I can understand for municipalities, this may become a burden that to pay for the hearing cost. So we hope that every party can take advantage of this conversation with the assessor. So, taxpayers, or if they think there is a mistake in the assessment, and we hope to encourage them to talk to assessor, and the assessor can explain how they come up with the assessed value. So if the taxpayers understand the process or the methodologies applied, or formula, model that used to come up with the assessed value, if they are satisfied with the communication, then they may think there's no need to file a notice appeal. So this is for kind of all parties. We do hope we kind of push them, encourage them to try to resolve the matter at, through a formal conversation with the assessor. And we also hope the assessor, explain to the taxpayers that how you come up with the assessed value. So it's kind of an education opportunity for both parties. The next one is related, like agreement to adjust the process. So right now there is a timeline for the appellant to withdraw their appeal. Previously, I think it was before the hearing date. Right now it's 72 hours before the hearing date, which is 3 days before the hearing. If they decide to withdraw the appeal, they can, let the secretary know, so this appeal is withdrawn. I think I understand some kind of issues experienced by SAMA or by municipalities, that the appellant, they may withdraw the appeal at the last minute, which you may already spend a lot of time prepare for the hearing, which that's why this section is there, that to ask the appellants if they want to decide, or if they decide to withdraw the appeal, make sure they withdraw like at least 3 days before the hearing. So that gives the municipalities or the assessors some time. If they know there's a withdrawal, they do not prepare, for the hearing. The next item is proceedings before the Board of Revision, which there's one item to be noted is there's some kind of a power for the chair of the Board of Revision. So if there are any kind of irrespectful behavior or improper conduct at the hearing, the chair can ask the person to leave, expel the individual. So this is now in the act. So the next item is like a failure to appear, which gives any party a right to request or adjournment if they have 2 or more hearings on the same day. This is probably more for the municipalities or more for SAMA, that if you are scheduled like for more than 1 hearing, like in one municipality or one municipality and another municipality, that it may be difficult for you to attend both hearings, then you can request an adjournment, and the Board of Revision, they have to, they will grant, they will approve this adjournment. Yeah, here is the decisions of Board of Revision. I think it is expected that the Board of Revision can publish a decision like they made, but the specific circumstances for how they publish the decision is to be addressed in regulations. Right now, there's not a section in the regulations yet. So the next item is effect on taxes of appeals regarding assessments. So confirms that current practice that no adjustment to the roll after the roll is confirmed. But adjustment to accommodate the appeal decision received in subsequent years can be made to the taxes for the years affected by the decision. So my understanding is, if the roll is already confirmed after a successful, appeal decision, the roll won't be changed because the roll is confirmed already. The assessed value is not to be changed, but the taxes can be refunded like retroactively. The next one is extension of time, which this I need to kind of make you aware. This may be of some of your interest. So in the past, if a Board of Revision, the Board of Revision, they have to make a decision within 180 days after publication of assessment notice. In the past, if a Board of Revision felt there's not enough time for them to make a decision within 180 days, they can apply to the Ministry of Government Relations, which is the advisory services team, for extension. So right now, this authority of approving extension of this time now is with the municipal council. So, if a Board of Revision, they felt there's not enough time to make a decision, they can apply to the municipal council and ask for extension. So you can approve the extension through a bylaw to extend the time to 30 days, but this extension cannot pass December 31st. So basically, if this is 2025, they have to make a decision somewhere within 2025. Even if you want to extend this time, like a council want to extend this time, you cannot extend more, like past to next year. You can only extend until December 31st, this current year. So once the council extends the time, it is required that the administrator need to notify, like my office, so I know there is an extension for this time. That's basically the amendments made to the act. So next I will talk about the amendments made to the regulations. Same as the act, you can find the equivalent sections in the city's regulations and the northern municipalities regulations. So first item is the direct appeals, which it talks about for certain appeals, it will bypass the first level, it will go to the second level directly. So what are this type of appeals? It's basically for commercial and industrial properties that the assessed value is more than $1 million. So for this type of properties, the appeals can go directly to the SMB. They don't have to appeal to the Board of Revision. So the second update is to the simplified appeals. So if it's like the simplified appeals is only at the Board of Revision, which is the first level. So if it's regarding a single family residential property, it doesn't matter what the assessed value is. Even is like 2 million, 3 million, it doesn't matter. You can still choose a simplified appeal, or appellants can still choose to use the simplified appeal, which means the process is simpler. They do not have to have 3 members to hear the appeal. They can have only 1 member, to sit, form a panel at the Board of Revision to hear the appeal. If it's not a single family residential property, like any other property type that has assessed value of $750,000 or less, they can choose the simplified appeals. So next item is deadline to withdraw appeal, which is kind of related, I discussed. It's 72 hours, 3 days before the hearing date. The appellant, if they decide to withdraw appeal, then they have to notify the Board of Revision Secretary to withdraw the appeal. Oh, yeah, that's all the all the information I have for you. So, oh.
Good. John Wagner, Armo-Pyapat. You mentioned centralized Board of Revision. Now, that's the default if you don't appoint a board, right?
At the time of you open the assessment roll, which when you open the assessment roll, the roll is open to the public. They can come and find if there's an error or if they think there's a mistake in the assessed value or in the property class or whatever information. Then they need to have a place to file the appeal. So at that time, you open the assessment roll, but I do not know if you have a certified Board of Revision appointed. I will contact your municipality and ask if you have a Board of Revision available. If you do not, I have to assign this centralized Board of Revision to you.
So what the concern I have is that I heard at SARM that some people, as long as you don't have an appeal, it's fine, but people have had an appeal that goes with the Central Board of Revision. It's very expensive. Like their billing rate is not hundreds, it's thousands.
Oh, okay. Hearing cost. That is kind of a consideration. That's why you make sure if you find a cheaper one, a better option, make sure you appoint it before you open the assessment roll.
Because what I'm being told is the Central Board of Revision is a number of lawyers, and you're paying at legal fees for those guys.
It's not all lawyers. As I am aware, there are a few lawyers. There are some work for the what do you call it? Arbitrator. Yeah.
Okay.
So they're not all lawyers. They do have people that who have a background with assessment. So they can come from anywhere. We do not have that requirement that they have to be lawyers. No, we don't have that requirement.
But my concern is that from what I heard at SARM is you're better off to find your own Board of Revision or whatever, because as long as you don't have anything go before the centralized board, you're fine. But if you do, I think you're in for a big shock.
Yeah, thank you for that information, because we have that contract with the centralized board because they are a nonprofit organization. They do have their own way, organize their business. We cannot intervene, especially considering the Board of Revision is like a quasi administrative tribunal. They do have their kind of independence. So it's like for the government, it's not appropriate that you intervene in specific appeals. So if you think, or if the municipalities think it's too costly, their charge is higher than other board revision, make sure you find other board revision that you think works better, and make sure you have one when you open the assessment roll.
Thank you.
Thank you for the question. Any other questions? Okay. Yeah. If not, thank you for being here. Okay. Oh, I didn't.
It's okay. So
Yeah.
I think
I'll let you manage this.
Thank you. Thanks, Juan. We're going to take.
Well, good afternoon, everyone. Sounds like you can hear me back there, and I'm pleased to get the opportunity to present an overview of the municipal board today. I'm the chair. I've been with the organization for almost 7 years. I think a little over 3 as the chair. I was the vice chair prior to that, and I come to the SMB with a legal background and also had worked in management positions in the credit union system for many years in Saskatchewan as well as British Columbia. So as mentioned, I'm going to provide an overview of both our mandate and our structure. We're going to give you a little bit of an idea of the volume of work we deal with, what our appeal process entails, discuss process and a tactic we use to try and deal with some of the larger case volumes we've been getting over the last number of years, and that's a case management process, and give you a little bit of an idea of what we do during our hearings. And all through it, there's plenty of time allotted for questions, so please don't wait till the end. If you have a question, just give a little wave, and I'm happy to address it if I can. So the mandate of the SMB is actually quite diverse and broad. We deal with the assessment appeals, which is what we interact with SAMA as our stakeholder on, but we have a number of other appeals that we deal with. So that keeps us quite busy. We have a committee for municipal boundary issues. An example of that in the recent past is an appeal we dealt with White City and the RM of Edenwold that made it into the media locally here in the last year, and was ultimately our decision was appealed to the Court of Appeal, which was upheld. But that was a fairly major appeal for us that took a number of years and a number of weeks of hearing. So it was a larger undertaking. And we compare that to something like a fire prevention appeals committee, a weed control appeals committee. Those are road maintenance. Those are committees that would deal potentially with 1 or 2 appeals a year, if that. So those don't really involve a lot of our resourcing. But the Assessment Appeals Committee, the Planning Appeals Committee, which I will touch on later in the presentation, the Board of Revenue Commissioners, which again I'll briefly speak to later, take up the considerable amount of our resourcing and time. And then the Local Government Committee as well. Appeals, we also will handle applications for debt, for infrastructure investment. For the cities, we are also responsible of regulating their debt limits, and that's something that is actually more prominent for us to deal with over the last couple of years, and we anticipate that's going to be something that we're going to be dealing with in the very near future as well, as the cities incur larger and larger amounts of debt. Our organizational chart, we're a fairly small organization, as you can see. I report directly to Minister Schmotz. He is a new minister and a new member of the legislature. We have a vice chair position that we are currently recruiting for, as well as we have 3 full-time board members that sit on our appeals and chair and write decisions, and we'll talk about that more as we go along. We also have, from the administrative side, we have a director and a manager of admin that deals with primarily the assessment, appeals, and workflows. And then we have a legal coordinator that edits our decisions as well as provides legal support and ensures that there's accuracy in some of the information that we provide when we adjudicate the appeals and then draft our decisions. We also then have a number of admin coordinators who deal with the large volume of material we deal with when we schedule our appeals and adjudicate the hearings. The one issue I guess I'd raise when it comes to our organization chart is we do have recruitment for those two positions right now, the vice chair and the full-time board member. And we previously also had a recruitment about a year ago where we were unable to find any qualified candidates. These positions really focus on assessment appeals, and we're looking for assessment expertise, and probably familiar to many here who deal with assessment issues. We're having a difficult time finding that expertise, and we're certainly hopeful this round we can fill those positions. But with the pending retirements of all of our board members coming up over the next 3 or 4 years, it is becoming more of a critical issue to recruit and ensure training of qualified individuals. This chart gives you an example of our appeal caseload. And as mentioned, committees like the weed control, the road maintenance have very few appeals. But the vast majority of our appeals are assessment appeals. And then the second and third largest for volume would be our Planning Appeals Committee, as well as our Board of Revenue Commissioners. And I said I'll provide just a little information on how those operate coming up. But we'll focus this committee, presentation primarily on the workings of that Assessment Appeals Committee. So this slide, the really important takeaway is that we're looking to demonstrate what the impact of the first year of each new year in a new assessment cycle. So as everyone's aware, this year coming up is another new year of a cycle. 2013 was a new year of the cycle, 2017, 2021, and here we are in 2025. And what you'll observe from the slide is traditionally in the first year or first 2 years of a cycle, we'll get the majority of the volume of appeals brought to us. And the rationale for that is, of course, this is a new opportunity for participants, agents, property owners to bring appeals. And what happens after the first or second year is usually those properties have experienced an appeal, our decision has been rendered, and any issues that arise pertaining to those properties at that point, for the most part, should be dealt with. The committee strives for consistency in its appeal, so if someone brought an appeal on the same property for the same issues, there wouldn't be an expectation that you'd get a different result. So usually the first and second year of the cycle bring the most volume of appeals. And that leads us to this next chart. And the important thing from our standpoint, and I think for any participant in the process here in the province, is what's been happening each assessment cycle in terms of the volume of appeals and the magnitude of the increase in appeals brought before the SMB. And we're, of course, a appellate tribunal. We handle appeals that originated in a board of revision. And what we are seeing, if you look at this from 2009 to 2013 to 2017 to 2021, is a magnitude of 50 to 80% increases each cycle, each revaluation cycle. So that is certainly putting in significant pressures, I think, on everyone in the system, but particularly those handling the appeals. Our resourcing is certainly is being stretched to its limits. One tactic we are fortunate to have in our legislation is, you saw our organizational chart earlier, we're also under the legislation that created our act, able to retain part-time members. And the good opportunity with part-time members is we can schedule them, we can bring them on board. They're not full-time members and they're not full-time FTEs where we have to pay them salary and benefits. They're people traditionally with expertise in particular areas. In assessment, for example, we have a professor from the University of Saskatchewan. We have people who have worked in assessment previously. And these are people who we can, when we're busy, engage them. And as the cycle goes along and we're not quite as busy, we can just focus on keeping our full-time people busy, and we don't engage the part-time people. So it does provide us a great amount of cost efficiency in that respect. This is giving you a bit of example of case flows over the years and the status as of December 31st of this year. We have been able, over the last few years, to get to the point where we are scheduling appeals as they come, basically as they come in, and we're in a position to hear them prior to the next year, the appeals coming forward. That's with the exception of those being held by the Court of Appeal. So we have about approximately 300 currently being held for Court of Appeal decisions. People who are work in the appeal area, and I think there's going to be a speaker after me speaking to some Court of Appeal decisions and the involvement in the Court of Appeal and assessment issues, but they certainly have become engaged and more active in adjudicating assessment appeals, showing interest in municipal law. So we are waiting for those decisions on 300 appeals. That doesn't mean, ideally, a lot of those will be addressed by the Court of Appeals decision, but there will be, I expect, some further appeals to be scheduled. But the intention, at this point, is that we will be we will have cleared the deck, and as this new year with the anticipated increased volumes come in this late summer and fall, we'll be able to begin scheduling those appeals as they come in. One other important aspect of some of the process changes we've made over the last number of years is to try and increase our ability to release written decisions in a timely manner. And we've, I think, been fairly successful in accomplishing that. Our internal policy goal is at 60 days from the date of the hearing. And as you'll see, our averages for the most part are well below that. There are a couple of more complex appeals that sometimes extend beyond the 60 days, but we traditionally are certainly getting those decisions out within 30 to 45 days. This pie chart shows a breakdown of where our appeals are coming from. As you would expect, the majority, 84%, are coming from cities, and 11% from RMs, and a very small amount from towns. So clearly, Regina and Saskatoon would be the primary locations that are generating our appeals. Saskatoon particularly over the last 2 years, 3 years. But we also do get a good volume from Moose Jaw, and those are certainly the stakeholders we deal with for the most part. Are there any questions yet to this point? Okay. I wanted to speak to the Planning Appeals Committee briefly, and this is another committee that the SMB is involved with. And these are appeals that would deal with planning matters. We would also deal with subdivisions. We would deal with requests to apply for variances if a development permit has been denied by a municipality or a city. Those are the sorts of appeals that the Planning Appeals Committee would deal with. Traditionally, we're dealing with 20 to 30 of those each year as well, on top of the assessment appeals and the Board of Revenue Commissioner appeals we get. These Board of Revenue Commissioner appeals are appeals that are forwarded on to us from the Ministry of Finance. They deal with provincial taxation matters For the most part, those would be provincial sales tax issues that arise with dispute of payment on those with provincial corporations traditionally. And we can only deal with those with our full-time members that have been appointed through the legislation. Our part-time members can't be appointed to deal with the Board of Revenue Commissioners. So when we look at our appeal process, we will receive an appeal from a Board of Revenue, from a BOR appeal, and we give them 14 days to provide us the record. And once we get the record, we'll give ourselves a maximum of 14 days to get the record to the point of preparation. We then get to a point where we get the record prepared, shared, and have a case management process that we'll discuss in a second. Once we get through those processes, we begin a scheduling, and a hearing notice will go out. Once we get to the point where we schedule the appeals, the parties then provide us written submissions, which in those submissions they will advocate their positions in respect of the issues that have been approved by us in the notice of appeal. Those are called grounds of appeal, and those will form the basis of what's adjudicated by the panel. Once we get through that piece, we'll ultimately have the parties appear before us, depending on the type of hearing it is, have a hearing here in Regina, potentially in our hearing room. The panel will deliberate right after the hearing is complete, and there will be a chair, and then there'll be a writer amongst the 2 or 3 people who are on the panel, and the writer will provide a draft written decision for the panel members, and then there'll be a final written decision that's circulated to the parties within that 60-day time period we discussed. And if these are appealed to the Court of Appeal, which are happening more and more, as we have more professional advocates involved in the process, specifically lawyers are getting more involved in the process, we'll have 20 days to get those materials to the Court of Appeal. And then often there'll be a 1 to 2 to 3 year period before the Court of Appeal provides their decision. With the increased volumes of appeals we receive, we've initiated what we call a case management process. And prior to this, there just wasn't necessarily a need to spend the time to go through a number of these things. We could just show up, and this is before my time, but you could just show up at a hearing and process and save time where we can. So the case management process will look at the timeliness of the appeal at the beginning to ensure that it's not a statute barred appeal. We'll review to ensure we have jurisdiction, that this is something properly the AAC should deal with. We'll look to see if there's what we call preliminary issues that should be dealt with, and often those are procedural potential issues to deal with various things that are separate from what we call the substantive issues of the appeal. And then we'll address confidentiality, which is a common issue in assessment appeals. And ultimately, we will discuss with the parties what type of hearing they want to have. And when we talk about what kind of hearing, we now provide parties the option to proceed by written submission or video conference. And we had embarked down that road just prior to COVID as a matter of dealing with some of these higher volumes of appeals. And it was timely for us to have gotten those processes in place, because when COVID came, we were able to basically continue operations without losing a step by having all our appeals dealt with by either written submissions or through video. As everyone will remember, we weren't able to have in-person hearings at that point in time. So we could keep the appeals moving forward without large delays once everyone kind of got through the first month or two of the change in the way we did business. But we now continue using it just because it's such a efficient approach for many people, and I'll discuss why in a minute as well. It's important to clarify the issues. Often when we receive a notice of an appeal, especially in assessment appeals, it can be difficult to understand what we're dealing with, and particularly ensure that there are supporting information, supporting evidence, supporting facts that relate back to the legal issues and assessment issues that are before the panel. We also often group appeals because they'll be, they're separate properties, particularly with large commercial appeals that we deal with. It's very time efficient for all the parties, including us, to group those together when we're dealing with similar issues. And we can then render a decision dealing with all the similar issues at once. When we assign our appeals, because there is such a volume of them, it's really a major component of our admin group's job to ensure that the scheduler is balancing everyone's workload and dealing with these in a timely fashion. It's not only our workloads that they're dealing with, but trying to accommodate the schedules of the various parties and stakeholders. Particularly, we're dealing with law firms, that sort of thing, to ensure we can get convenient dates to schedule these hearings. We then have a chart of assignments, which we're constantly looking at to see what the future holds. And it's kind of a constant daily discussion between the manager and myself of where the workload's going and who's doing what. So it's going to be a busy year ahead, or the next couple of years for sure. I just spoke earlier to written submissions and the different types of hearings that we have. Written submissions are fairly self-explanatory in the sense that we do not require the parties to attend. They just provide their positions to us in writing. We have requirements about the length of the submissions and that we will accept, and some of the requirements of what needs to go in the submission. But what it does, if people are outside Regina in the northern or whatever part of the province, we're happy to save them travel time, especially in the winter, and cost. Video conference can provide that same benefit of cost savings and time savings. The benefit of the video conference in comparison to the written submission is where the panel feels that it would be useful to be able to have interaction with the parties, ask questions of the participants for clarification. The video conference is the better tool in that case. And of course, we continue on with our in-person hearings for the more complex appeals here in Regina, or where in rare occasions we do go to Saskatoon for in-person hearings. Before the video conference capability, we would go up there every week. So it's been a real time saver for our organization to be able to utilize the video conference, particularly with Saskatoon, because that's where the largest volume of our appeals come from. So just to give you a bit of example of some of the specific terms we deal with, we, as an appellate tribunal, because we are the second appeal body, the Board of Revision will have dealt with the appeal in the first instance. We have what is called a hearing on the record. That means we're not rehearing the matter. We are dealing specifically with what transpired at the Board of Revision. And that means that we deal solely with what we call the record, the documents, and potentially a transcript or of testimony that was before the Board of Revision. And that means that we will then only accept new evidence in exceptional circumstances. And those circumstances are prescribed in the governing legislation and set out those specific circumstances where we can accept new evidence. But again, that's very limited. And what that means then for participants is you really need to get your self-organized and prepared when you get to the Board of Revision to put your best case forward. Because if you miss something there, you're not going to get a do-over when you come before the municipal board. As I've mentioned before, when we have our hearings, we will always reserve. We don't provide a decision right at the end of the hearing. We reserve our decision, the panel deliberates, and then we'll provide a written decision back to the parties that they can use if they choose to appeal to the Court of Appeal. And finally, it's kind of a very specific issue. We have dealt with it with SAMA in certain circumstances and other assessment providers, is when there is no specific remedy that one of our decisions will address, meaning a specific reversion or upholding of a specific assessment value, when it becomes more of a general or broader issue of assessment practice, there may be some specific circumstances where we will remit the decision back to the assessor to deal with. And there's been some recent Court of Appeal decisions that deal with that as well. But what that means, and when we speak, there's no legislative authority to enforce it. Once we send it back to SAMA or another assessment provider, we just rely on their good faith efforts to provide that remittal and take the direction of the committee in the spirit that it was sent to them. So I think that really gets us close to the end. Happy to answer any questions anyone has. Well, yeah, I'll try to, if not, I'll try to answer it. If not, we'll get you an answer.
Chad. Now I'm going to call Randy Rambo from Sask Assessment to come up and give his.
Thank you, Becky. I appreciate the opportunity to speak with you today. Just a little bit of background with me. So I'm new to being a regional manager with SAMA, about 6 weeks. Prior to that, I was the appeal lead for SAMA. So my had come down from the SMB or the Court of Appeal and found that out to the appraisers. And also a primary role that I had was to train our appraisers navigate the appeal process. So I'm going to be speaking to the aspects of the life of an appeal inside SAMA and some processes and steps that we follow inside SAMA right through the Court of Appeal. And then after that, Sean Cooney will come up and he will speak to IPTI and some recommended changes to appeals that came out of some processes there. Okay, just to give a perspective on appeals at the local board level over the last 11 years. So SAMA has processed an average of 2,120 appeals at the board level. So that's an average over the last 10, 11 years. And so appeals at SAMA and at the board of revision level can start in one of two ways. First, it can simply start with a call from a ratepayer. From that point, we'd be happy to discuss the assessment with them, and in some cases, we can identify an error during that conversation, and if we do, we can certainly encourage them to appeal, and we can help them craft grounds if needed. The second way an appeal can start is through an accepted appeal notice from a board secretary, which also leads to speaking with the ratepayer. So during those conversations, SAMA will explain the assessment in detail. We will go through the physical attributes of the property. We always have to explain that assessments are relative to a retroactive base year, and we find that in many cases that ratepayers at first thought don't understand that. So that's something that we always speak to. And depending on the type of property, we may have to get into whether it's a non-regulated assessment or a regulated assessment. So regulated assessments is something that flows from the market valuation standard. So it really involves sales as the underlying basis to the assessment. And of course, the regulated assessment flows from following the assessment manual. The goal of all this in our conversations with ratepayers is to try to come to an agreement to adjust. Sometimes that's possible and sometimes it's not. One thing that we consider when we receive an appeal is whether the ratepayer for the properties involved, whether they supplied SAMA the information that may relate to a value of the property. There's some language in the legislation that requires ratepayers to give SAMA information. That may be a sales verification form, that may be information related to income and expense information as it relates to income properties. So if we don't get that sort of information back, there is some provisions in the legislation that an appeal may be blocked, and sometimes they are. In terms of internal processes, we do have some quality control measures inside SAMA. So for agreements that we do sign off on that are over 10% of the assessed value or over $30,000, we do require a manager to sign off on those. And just as a further note, in all of the appeal process and agreements to adjust, SAMA primarily responds only to the valuation matters. Under the acts, local assessors, there's some language in the legislation that they make the initial call as to whether a property, in terms of tax class, they make that call. However, under the Municipalities Act, there is a slight tweak there where SAMA makes the call on the initial, as it relates to agricultural use. So prior to 2025, agreements to adjust required a notice of appeal, and Juan spoke to earlier that there was a change to that for 2025 and moving forward, and that agreements can be explored prior to receiving a notice of appeal. Yes, prior to 2025, we could not enter into an agreement to adjust until we had an accepted appeal by the board. And I believe a 2025 change, Juan can clarify that. Problem, then at that stage, we definitely advise them to file an appeal, and it will be dealt with in due course. A primary consideration of a notice of appeal is that it must allege specific errors and specific supporting facts. That's needed because it's hard to focus agreements or dealings in front of the board when the grounds are vague or not clear. An example of that we see commonly is things like, my taxes are too high, or I have no services, or something of the like. One important thing to note is an agreement to adjust ends the appeal, and it must be signed by the ratepayer, by SAMA, and by the municipality. Our best practice is to discuss the proposed new valuation with the municipality first before it is discussed or offered to the ratepayer. Again, the goal, if an error exists, it's to come to an agreement to adjust, which I must note ends the right of appeal for the specific year involved. As of right now, for 2024, when I looked at the numbers, around 57% of appeals in SAMA were agreements to adjust. 5 years ago, that number was higher. It was close to 70%. So if no agreement to adjust is possible, we head to a board hearing. At that point, SAMA will review the grounds in more detail. We'll look at the supporting facts. We'll look at the arguments put forward by the ratepayer or their tax agent, and we determine the best way to support the values. So we will explain the factual attributes of the property. We will explain the market analysis applied for non-regulated properties. In the case of regulated properties, we will explain how the manual was applied. And we look to explain how assessment law and assessment practice as laid out in manuals such as the handbook apply to the facts of the property. And we will respond specifically to the issues raised by the appellant. So SAMA, when we submit briefs to the Board of Revision, they typically range in terms of page length from 120 pages to 250. So that's pretty typical. The appellant briefs, especially in the case of tax agent briefs, are longer in many cases. And of course, if we're dealing with mom and pop ratepayer, their documentation is usually pretty limited. So SAMA's role at the board hearing is to explain the assessment relative to the issues raised in the appeal. And each appeal that requires a hearing will require, as I just spoke to, SAMA to submit a submission, which typically for more complex appeals will take a SAMA appraiser 3 to 4 days to complete on average. So as of late, meaning the last 2 or 3 years, each submission that SAMA files has 3 parts. The first part is Part A, which is the explanation of the assessment, and that is basically what is the factual context of the assessment and the property, and what did the assessor do and why to assess that property. The second part of the SAMA submission, referred to as Part B, is a specific, we respond to the issues raised in the appellant's notice of appeal. And the Part C of our submission is called the Common Case Law and Legislative Brief. So why we made this change in recent years is that on appeal, especially at the SMB and the court level, legal counsel on behalf of the owners were really making the case that there's a difference that SAMA needs to do. First, we need to explain in a neutral way the assessment, along with supply the assessment field sheet, and that must be simply that, a neutral explanation. And the instruction that we got from the SMB and the court is that we needed to keep that separate from the response to the issues raised on the appeal, which was advocating for a certain position. So if we're heading for a hearing, there are filing deadlines and a hearing process for the Board of Revision. And it looks like as follows. So 20 days before the appeal, the appellant must file. Just a note there is that simplified appeals do not require the appellant to file any materials. There is the election on the notice of appeal to the board to select the simplified appeal process. When I was asked to look into our SAMA's volumes of simplified appeals last year, I found that ratepayers were not electing to do that in any great volumes. And as far as I could tell, looking at our appeal tracker, there were under 10 appeals under the simplified appeal process that went to a board hearing. So after the 20 days served by the appellant, then SAMA moves to file our 10-day, the Part A, B, and C that I had just spoke to. SAMA generally speaks to valuation matters, and the municipality generally speaks to tax class matters. The municipality may, if there's a hearing, they may choose to file their own brief, or they may choose to speak orally to matters that are tax class that are separated from the agricultural use matter that I had spoke to. So after the 10-day materials from SAMA or the local assessor go out, the appellant has the option to file a 5-day rebuttal, and that is primarily to respond to new issues raised in the SAMA submission. In terms of the board hearing, so that process generally looks like, first off, the appellant gets to speak briefly to the points that they intend to make. Then SAMA follows suit. Those are opening statements. From there, the board hearing moves to first the appellant speaking to the core of their appeal. They may speak to the remedy that they're looking for. And then after that, SAMA will speak to the assessment practice that we followed. We'll speak to the property itself. And once that's complete, the appellant does have the option to rebut anything SAMA had said or to ask questions. That sometimes happen and sometimes does not. And the hearing generally concludes with final remarks, first by SAMA and then by the appellant. In terms of the board hearing itself, in recent years, well, last year, for instance, I observed board hearings range from 1.5 hours, which is probably most typical, especially for some servicing boards. But I did observe last year board hearings extend to several hours. Just a general comment, in my former role as appeal coordinator, the Board of Revision does a big job. Assessments are very complex, and so is the arguments. So once a board decision is received, either party can appeal that to the SMB. When SAMA looks at the board decision, we look at a lot of things as to making an internal choice as if we want to appeal. Sometimes we appeal, sometimes the appellant appeals, but we look at whether, from our view, whether the board made errors of jurisdiction. An example of that could be if the board refused to hear an appeal. We look at whether from our view, the board made errors of law. So that would be taking case law, a snippet of case law, and applying it to the subject appeal without really considering that the underlying appeal may have had a different factual basis than the appeal involved. We looked at whether the board from our view, made errors of fact. For instance, a simple example of that could be, did the board err or state that there was a 1-story property when it was really a 2? So that's pretty simple. We also examine whether the board made errors of mixed fact and assessment law. So there is a case law index that SAMA has. It's in recent times it's spanned to over 1,000 pages. So that is case law set forth by either the SMB or the court over the last 20 plus years, and really it's quite easy to get lost in that when a board is adjudicating an appeal. So there may be errors there. And the other thing that we look at is, does the board decision challenge a provincial model that SAMA has applied? So that an example of that could be hotel properties and those sorts of things, or grain bin appeals. And we look at the assessed value at risk. When a single property may have a large assessed value at risk, and that is amplified when there's a lead appeal and there's children of appeals that fall underneath. It's quite common, even at the board level, when there's a lead appeal situation, that the assessed value at risk can easily be in the tens of millions of dollars. We consider whether, from our view, there is a fundamental assessment principle at risk. And we look at whether there was any procedural matters that may have existed in the board hearing or the board decision itself. An example of that could be if the appellant, for instance, right at the board hearing, added new grounds of appeal, and SAMA, for instance, didn't have a proper right of reply, or we didn't have time to research a reply. That could arguably be a procedural matter that may have to be adjudicated by the SMB. In terms of SMB appeals, in terms of perspective from that level, so over the last 11 years, SAMA has processed an average of 138 appeals per year at the SMB level. Appeals that go to that level are generally very complex, and they're very time consuming. Ultimately, if there's a large volume of appeals at any level, it really means that other work is being put aside. That could be revaluation work, or it could be maintenance work, or reinspection work. But generally speaking, there's a relatively low percentage of mom and pop appeals that go to the SMB. And there's generally a high percentage of tax agent appeals that go to the SMB. So for those of you that may not have heard about a tax agent, so these are individuals who work for a fee to try to overturn assessments, and it's become a big business. When I started with SAMA 20 years ago, I didn't hear much about tax agents. And I was probably took 5 years into my career before I spoke to one. And now it seems like it's very regularly that myself or our appraisal staff are dealing with tax agents. In many cases, the assessment appraiser still represents SAMA at the SMB, but it's becoming more common that we'll be engaging legal counsel both at that level and in certain cases at the level of the Board of Revision. And again, with the SMB, there's briefs involved. However, they are shorter in length than at the board level. So in terms of the Court of Appeal, or in some cases, the Court of King's Bench. So SAMA will assign legal counsel to all appeals at the court level, whether we're the respondent or the appellant. The Court of Appeal is limited to adjudicating questions of law or of jurisdiction of SMB decisions. And so the arguments and matters before the court are very legalized. Just in terms of the amount of court level appeal action that SAMA has had, so that's a pretty busy slide, but from 2013 to 2016, that cycle, SAMA and the cities had 27 appeals go to the court. That rose to 47 appeals from the 2017 to 2020 cycle. And for the most recent cycle that just concluded at the end of last year, was close behind at 44 appeals that went to the court. And of course, SAMA had only a portion of these appeals, so there were 10 for 2013 to 2016. There were 31 at SAMA from 2017 to 2020, and 18 from 2021 to 2024. So according to our statistics, the life cycle of an appeal, so on average, from the date the notice of appeal is filed at the board, roughly 600 days pass to an SMB decision. And at the court level, from the date of the notice of appeal to a court decision, roughly 1,200 days pass. So with that, is there any questions that arise? Okay, I'll turn it over to Sean Cooney to speak to IPTI recommended changes.
All right, thank you, Randy. Yeah, I'm going to just spend a few moments going over this item here. And what it has to do with are some recommendations to improve the appeal process in Saskatchewan. Now, we heard from Yuan and Chad and Randy, just the complexity of appeals, the backlog in the caseloads, and we're now seeing Court of Appeal decisions taking many years to decide. So what happened was the Saskatchewan Urban Municipalities Association commissioned a report. And it was by the City Mayor's Caucus to look at the property tax system in Saskatchewan. And it was done by the International Property Tax Institute, IPTI. And it's a worldwide organization with knowledge of assessment systems, and they do this work as a third party and give a unbiased opinion of different systems. So it was very positive. It's always good to look at the system you've got to see how it's being done elsewhere and what changes could be made to improve the process. So SUMA set up a working group, and this group was made up of city managers, city assessors, representation from SUMA. John Wagner from our board was there representing SARM, Urban Municipal Administrators Association, and this group looked at this very comprehensive report, hundreds of pages. And they looked at 4 main options for change, and we're going to discuss those a little bit tomorrow at the AGM. But what came of the discussion, we had a city assessor from another city in Alberta, and we had other individuals present to this working group of what it's like in other jurisdictions with some of the changes that we might be making. So it's very, very positive. And out of that discussion came a number of additional recommendations, or miscellaneous recommendations, if you will. Most of these recommendations were assessment appeal related, like how can we improve the system in Saskatchewan? And the focus is to reduce the complexity, the duration of these appeals, and ultimately to lower the costs that all stakeholders of the system are paying, for the current appeal load. So there's a number of recommendations that were put forth, and I'm just going to go through them very quickly. One was to allow 1 appeal per revaluation cycle on the same grounds of appeal. What the group heard, and what we're seeing in Saskatchewan, and it's happening across North America, certain properties just appeal. It's just a normal routine, so they'll appeal in year 1. Even if they're successful, they'll appeal in year 2, and so on. Just trying to get their tax lowered at any cost. And what this does is it adds a lot of cost to the system. because we're actually repeating a lot of the appeal work over again, and we're incurring a lot of legal costs. So if it's the same grounds of appeal, can we limit it to one appeal per cycle? We're not talking about a residential property or a very unsophisticated property owner, but we're talking about multi-million-dollar, highly complex property types. And if we could limit it to one appeal per cycle, we could save the system a lot of unnecessary cost. The second recommendation was that high-value specialized appeals bypass the Board of Revision and go directly to the Saskatchewan Municipal Board. And the reason for this is the Board of Revision is the first appeal level, and quite often we're going there on these complex properties and we're doing all this work, and now we're needing to bring in a solicitor when we know full well that that same appeal is going to be appealed to the Saskatchewan Municipal Board, just a matter of course. The property owner could be successful, but they still want to appeal on the remaining grounds to get it lowered. So we're thinking, and this came from the work the group did, if you've got a highly complex property, and we could be talking a potash mine or a very complex office building, could it go directly to the municipal board? The reason is they've got the expertise, they've got the panel members, some who are appraisers and lawyers that could manage that efficiently and get a really good quality decision that would go directly to the courts. And the other thing is, it avoids a situation where you've got a company appealing 15 properties to 15 different boards of revision looking for a win somewhere. Then they can take that forward to say, we were successful on this grounds in some cases and not in others, and begin to build. They've got different decisions on the exact same property, which adds to the complexity of the appeal. We would like to, or the group put forward, review the timelines and impact of appeal decisions. And Chad mentioned some of the SMB decisions now are taking multiple years. They're having to hold some in abeyance. And if it does go to the Court of Appeal, it's not uncommon to wait 2 to 3 years for an appeal decision. The problem is that can actually take that appeal decision across to another revaluation. We need that decision to help inform us how to determine our assessments in the current cycle. So if we've done analysis for a future revaluation and we get a decision from the Court of Appeal, it's too late. Those values are already determined and they're wrong based on the Court of Appeal decision. So we had one decision just recently. It was 7 years in duration reaching us with a decision. So that is highly problematic, and that's the rationale behind this recommendation. Today was discussed meaningful mandatory outreach between parties to an appeal. And this is a very positive item in legislation, and it's there. And it requires that the parties sit down, discuss the issues, narrow the grounds of appeal if they can, and then include in the notice of appeal a statement that they did meet and what they determined through that meeting, and if they didn't meet, why. So what's happening in certain cases is this is being circumvented. There is no true effort being made by one or both parties to get together and to meet. And if we can take these hundreds and hundreds of appeals and at least have a discussion and look for common grounds, then that appeal moves forward on a much narrower set of issues, and that's going to reduce cost to the appeal system. So can we strengthen that and make it mandatory versus it can be circumvented? You could send an email to say, well, I tried and I couldn't get a hold of them, and that type of thing. So that's a positive recommendation. A couple final recommendations have to do with the use of single property appraisals. Now, this is something you'll see elsewhere in certain jurisdictions. When we do our analysis on the market valuation standard, like Randy mentioned, we're using sales. And we're using all of the sales to build our valuation models to determine assessments in our client municipalities. We do not allow currently in the province the use of single property appraisals. And so this came out of the IPD report. They said, look at this as a potential. And the SUMA working group did look at it, and they agreed we should not allow single property appraisals. This was a decision made when we set up the assessment system in 2009. And the rationale is we build the assessments with all the sales. A sale is a fact. It happened. An appraisal is an opinion. So you could commission 3 appraisals and get 3 different opinions and get 3 different levels of value. So where does that appraisal factor in with the facts, the sales? And that's the problem they're having in other jurisdictions, is that the boards are completely confused. They don't know what weight to give an appraisal relative to the sales that actually occurred. So currently they're not allowed in our province, and that was a recommendation of the SUMA working group to continue with that. And related to that is not allowing single property appraisals to supplement market data. And so if you've got 20 sales, then you cannot bring in an appraisal to augment that. That's not necessary. So there's always comparable market data that we're looking for. If it's not in your neighborhood or your municipality, we can look to other jurisdictions and go at it that way. The other recommendation, and I said jurisdictions, I mean municipalities in Saskatchewan. The other recommendation is not to allow market data from other jurisdictions, this should say other provinces or states. And what the rationale behind this is, if market data is brought in, let's say by a tax agent who's very sophisticated, it could be a sale from another province or it could be from the States, and that's been tried. The problem is we have no ability to validate that sale. We don't know the conditions of the sale. We can't speak to the purchaser or the vendor typically, and we certainly can't check the physical because we can't fly to a different location to check it out. So it has been the rule that we don't allow that, and the working group upheld that, and they said, that's a really positive stipulation in our legislation. So all these things that you see on this one screen were decided many years ago because Saskatchewan was the last jurisdiction to move to market value assessment in Canada. And these were recommendations that were given to us and kind of codified in legislation and used. And the SUMA working group is saying continue with that. So where we're at right now is these various recommendations came from SUMA. They've gone now to the ministry, but they also went to the City Assessor SAMA Committee. And that's a group of SAMA staff. And we meet with the independent cities of Saskatoon, Regina, Prince Albert, and Swift Current. And we get together just to talk about assessment issues, but we did in particular look at these recommendations and we endorsed them. And furthermore, we provided a package recently of legislative recommendations to the Ministry of Government Relations. And that's because the ministry is looking at the municipal acts currently. They've got the acts open and they're accepting feedback. So we endorse the SUMA working group's recommendations, and right now we're just waiting. At some point the ministry will have some draft legislation and regulation for us to consider, but that's where that is at. And we just wanted to update you on those recommendations. And are there any questions related to that? All right, thank you very much.
Thanks, Sean. Is there any questions for Randy or any, well, I guess Sean. I think Chad had to leave already. Looks like Kevin's got one.
Hi, Becky. No direct question, but just a comment on processing of agreements adjust for this year for SAMA. I'm the Managing Director of Assessment Services, and when we look at the legislation, the way it's written, there's one section in 226 that talks about in prescribed circumstances, an agreement must be entered, an attempt to an agreement must be entered into prior to, doing an appeal. Then further on it says the minister may make the regulations about the prescribed circumstances. But my understanding is the regulations right now don't have a prescribed circumstance. So for right now, it's got the groundwork there, but we just process assessment or agreements the same fashion. We can have that discussion with the property owner, and then if we identify there can be an agreement made, we'll start that process, but an actual appeal still needs to be launched.
Thank you, Kevin. Any questions? Last call? All right. Well, thanks to our presenters today. Thank you all for coming, whether you were here in the room with us or online somewhere comfy. the turnout was great. Just a reminder for tomorrow, registration starts at 8:15. The meeting starts at 9:30. So thanks for coming and have a great night.